As you can see, I have Richard Dawkins on my screen. He had this debate a while back with Cardinal George Pell. He's a member of the Catholic Church. I think he's a cardinal over all of Australia, at the time anyways, something like that. He's very, very high up. And in addition to that, Cardinal Pell was caught up in one of those child mistreatment scandals, with the Catholic Church. Not fantastic. That was long after this debate took place. This debate happened 9 years ago, actually, 2014. It's really fascinating to go back and watch, though I do have to put in obligatory, not really a fan of Richard Dawkins. I feel like he's not great on trans issues, LGBT issues generally. I'm just not a fan of him at all, honestly. But like I said, it's valuable to go back and listen to what the talking points were back then and things like that. So without further ado, let's give this debate a listen, see what he had to say. And while we do, we are going to play some Breath of the Wild. All right, let's give this a listen.
Most evolutionary biologists today believe that the animal world is developing according to patterns, which we're starting to know more and more about them.
It's developing into pattern. I mean, yeah, there are patterns that we can pick up in various things. What is he talking about?
And
are you referring to intelligent design?
No, I'm not. I'm leaving that right to one side.
Do you believe in intelligent design?
I believe
that there's an intelligent designer.
I believe God is intelligent.
No, but
how we work.
It's obviously a loaded question. But do you believe in intelligent design and an intelligent designer?
It all depends.
Yeah, that's complicated because intelligent design was the Christian attempt to unseat evolution as the explanation, and the basis for the idea behind intelligent design is there are parts of animals that have irreducible complexity, not just animals, but like cells. A cell needs a flagellum, which is a little tail that helps it move. A cell needs that to travel around and gather food. But it can't develop one, it can't evolve one, unless it's already eating. Irreducible complexity. But even that is explained and understood. We know how this stuff works. There was actually a court case that was litigated over whether intelligent design should be taught in schools as a competing theory to evolution, and it was shot down. It should not be, because it's not an intelligent hypothesis. It's easily disproven and explained.
It's obviously a loaded question, but do you believe in intelligent design and an intelligent designer?
It all depends what you mean. I believe God created the world. I'm not entirely sure how it works out scientifically. But
that's a wise decision to say that. I don't know how it works out scientifically, but I believe that God, blah, 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 whatever. That's the best thing to say. Don't succumb to the God of the gaps, fallacy.
I wonder, whether Richard believes that the patterns we see in nature, whether they are real or whether they're an illusion.
I'm going to leave that question.
They are real.
All right.
I mean, those patterns are real, but our perception of those patterns are an illusion. Like the face on Mars. I don't know if you guys remember this. The first pictures that we got on Mars were we found a picture of a face, and everybody was freaking out in the 80s or 90s, believed that it was aliens that created it. And we did another pass over that area, took a high-res picture, and it turns out it was just like a mountain formation that looked like a face with, the low-quality picture that was originally taken. We find these patterns. Now, those patterns are real, but it doesn't mean that there's some kind of special meaning to any of them.
Okay, that's a quick answer. Let's go to our next question. It is a video. It comes from Matthew Thompson in Toowong, Victoria.
I'm an atheist. What do you think will happen when I die, and how do you know?
George Pell, we'll start with you. You ought to be an authority on this, I imagine.
Well, I know from the Christian point of view, God loves everybody. that every genuine motion towards the truth is a motion towards God, and when an atheist dies, like everybody else, they'll be judged on the extent to which they have moved towards goodness and truth and beauty. But in the Christian view, God loves everyone except those who turn their back on him through evil acts.
Interesting. So atheists have a chance to get into heaven, is what he's saying. It's not just about turning your back on God and not believing, it's about committing evil acts. That's a really interesting perspective, and one that I don't think I've heard from many evangelical extremists, at the very least.
Atheism not an evil act?
No, not no, I don't. In most cases, it's not.
So
many honest atheists.
I guess to get to the point of the question, I suppose, he may be having a little wager here, but is it possible for an atheist to go to heaven?
Well, it's not my business.
No, but you're the only authority we have here.
I would say certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
That's actually a pretty big deal. I can't believe he said that. An atheist can get into heaven. Wow.
And just on the subject of heaven, if we can, what is your own concept of what heaven is?
Well, even St. Paul was severely agnostic, but one way in which the Christians differ from the Greeks believed in the immortality of the soul. We Christians believe, with one section of the Jewish people, in the resurrection of the body. So in some sense we will be there as continuing persons. In some, with a new heaven and a new earth, with all the good things that we've done will be incorporated into the new heaven and new earth. How it'll work out, I don't know, because I think physically and morally and intellectually we're at our peak at different stages in our life. How it'll work out, I've got no idea, but that's the general outline of Christian teaching.
You believe, you think about it as a kind of collection of individual souls. In fact, obviously billions and billions of individual souls with their own personality existing in some galactic space.
I think that's a traditional, that's certainly the traditional Christian view. It's the view that I accept, and it's also the view of some of the Jews.
Richard Dawkins.
Well, the answer to the question, what's going to happen when we die, depends whether we're buried, cremated, or give our bodies to science. Can
I say this? If you're actually an agnostic and you keep aside this small portion of your brain for subsequent proof, I mean, you might get presented with that proof when you die.
The brain is what we do our thinking with. The brain is going to rot. That's all there is to it. I'm intrigued by the cardinals saying that the Christians believe you're going to be resurrected in the body. I mean, that's an astonishing idea, and I don't believe you really mean that. And I think, just as I don't believe you really mean that the wafer turns into the body of Christ, you must mean body in some rather special sense.
No, I think he means exactly what he said. He just doesn't understand all of the ridiculous implications that come along with it.
Mr. Dawkins, I don't say things I don't mean.
Well, then what do you mean?
I'll tell you. And I've just explained what the bodily
Please, tell me.
Resurrection means to the extent that I can understand it. I certainly believe that when the words of consecration are uttered, that they become the body and blood of Christ. Now,
Oh, then send him for a DNA test in that case, and we'll just settle this once and for all, right?
I've had a little kid come up to me when that was explained and say, can I have a look in the chalice to see if it's turned to blood? And of course it hasn't. We don't believe that. It's not against reason. I believe it because I believe the man who told us that was also the Son of God. He says, this is my body, this is my blood. And I'd much prefer to listen to him and take his word than yours.
Well, it's your interpretation that's a problem. You're interpreting this in an ass-backwards way.
But other Christian denominations are quite happy to take that as a symbolic, metaphorical meaning. Catholics take it as a literal meaning, and I take it. I'm trying to be charitable by trying to suggest that it's that same sense in which you say that the body is resurrected, because the body is certainly not resurrected in terms of the cell, the protoplasm, the proteins, the DNA. That doesn't happen any more than the wafer turns into that. You're right when you said that to the child. So you do not mean that the wafer turns into the body in any sense in which normal English language usage would understand. You mean it in some other sense, and I take it's that same sense.
A lot of the time, these people like to have it both ways. They like to say, I mean it in a metaphorical sense, and I also mean it in a literal, real sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all, honestly.
That the body is resurrected.
Well, can I ask you whether you do mean it in a metaphorical sense, in the same way that you believe Adam and Eve are metaphorical creatures?
I don't.
See, this is what I was talking about. The guy wants to have it both ways. I don't mean it in a metaphorical sense. Well, I don't mean it in a literal sense. I showed it to a kid, and because he wanted to see if it was blood, and I said, no, of course it's not blood. But I don't mean it in a metaphorical sense. I mean it in a literal sense. He wants it both ways. It's just nonsense, ultimately.
I follow it. I understand it. According to a system of metaphysics that was spelled out by the Greeks before Christ came, which we've adopted. And that is, there's a substance which is the core of a being, and it is revealed to us through what are called accidents. Now, I believe that the core of the being becomes the bread, becomes the body and blood of Christ. It continues to look exactly as it was. We believe that in the Catholic Church. Now, I know you're a cultural Anglican, and we can't...
I admire atheists to be absolutely certain of no transcendent dimension. I thank God I'm not that certain, says this, this commenter here. Well, that's the thing. We're not certain. We don't know. That's the problem. Cardinal Pell here is claiming, without a shadow of a doubt, that he is correct. Richard Dawkins is on the other end of the spectrum and says he is very, very confident that he's correct, that there's no God, but you can never be 100% on anything. Most atheists leave room for the possibility that it's not true. Like, we just don't know is the bottom line. We have no idea. And we have no way of finding out on top of that. That's really the problem here. The certainty is on the other side of the table, but people like to twist it around and make it seem like something that it's not.
Blame the
I'm
Anglican.
also a rationalist.
Sorry, let me step back.
We believe that in the Catholic Church. Now, I know you're a cultural Anglican, and we can't blame the Anglican.
I'm also a rationalist. I use... English is my native language. The wafer does not become the body of anybody in the English language.
All right, I think we've resolved that you both disagree on this point rather substantially. Let's go to our next question, which is from Michael Matty.
Is it okay to tell a child that God doesn't exist?
Richard Dawkins.
I think it's okay to tell a child the truth.
I feel like I've had a lot of trouble with this specific question myself, like having a kid and not really being fully out of religion myself when I had the kid. I eventually came to the conclusion that I was just going to tell her my thoughts on it and leave it at that. Let her come to her own conclusions. And she even went to church every week with her family. I mean, not extremist nutcase church. They were all pretty chill. But she went to church with them every single week. It was some Methodist church. Didn't hate anybody for anything. In fact, I'm pretty confident they had a gay pastor, but I could never, pin him down on that. Anyways, I didn't want to influence her feelings or beliefs on it, so I just let her believe what she wanted and told her what I felt. And eventually, my mom was brainwashing her, and I felt obligated to deprogram her the hard way. So I sat her down and explained to her why and how my mom was wrong about everything, because she was talking about getting baptized as a Jehovah's Witness and everything for a while there. So I went in there and sat her down, and explained how to logic your way through things. She's probably a little bit too young to get the talk that I gave her about logic and reasoning and fully understand it. But I think she got a grip on it. It's a very complex conversation to have a lot of the time. So anyways, I was kind of forced into explaining this stuff to her. I would have just left it entirely up to her. But, yeah, generally speaking, I think that you should just let the kid believe what they want, but tell them what you believe.
But I would prefer to encourage a child to make up her own mind and to think about the evidence and to believe things when there is evidence. What I think is not okay, what I think is deeply immoral, is to tell a child that when she dies, if she's not good, she's going to go to hell. That seems to me to be mental child abuse and...
Oh, yeah, and if you didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, you may not be aware of how they do this, but the Catholic Church is just insanely wrong in how they teach children about hell. It's just depraved shit, what they say, and some of the positions that they take. They do everything they can to program in this deep fear of hell. I didn't have that because I was Jehovah's Witness. We didn't believe in hell. I believed Armageddon was coming any 5 minutes now, and if I wasn't a baptized, believing, door-knocking Jehovah's Witness, I was going to get it. But, yeah, that fear of hell didn't exist in me the same way it exists in Catholics. It's bad. And a lot of Christian denominations, too. Fire and brimstone preachers.
An utter disgrace.
I remember when I was in England, we were preparing some young English boys. They're from very...
Dawkins is laughing at that. That is kind of funny. It wouldn't be funny, except for the fact that George Pell was actually, like, credibly accused of taking advantage of children. I to my knowledge, I think like 12-year-old boys. It's been a while since I looked into this, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, he's one of the many people in the Catholic Church who was credibly accused of this.
Preparing them for
Come on.
Thank you. Preparing them for First Communion. And they were very patriotic young lads. And one of them announced very breezily to me that he didn't believe in hell. And I mean, certainly the idea of any child being sent to hell, I agree that that is grotesque.
Well, that's interesting because that's like church doctrine. By default, they believe that children do go to hell, in fact.
And that's not the Christian God. But anyhow, this kid, I said simply, Hitler.
Well, I mean, that is the Christian God in the mind of Catholics. What is he talking about?
I agree that that is grotesque, and that's not the Christian God. But anyhow, this kid, I said simply, Hitler.
Oh, okay. Is he just gonna like leave it at that? Just why the dead silence?
Hitler might be in hell. Started the Second World War, caused the death of 50 million. Or would you prefer a system where Hitler got away with it for free? Anyhow, the little kid was quite patriotic, and he said, he realised hell was in with a chance if Hitler was going to go there.
What about a system where he was simply obliterated and didn't exist anymore?
Well, he would have got away with too much as far as I'm concerned.
So you actually prefer the idea of hell as a place of punishment but for who? Where do you draw the line? Do unbelievers go to hell?
No. The only people... well, one, I hope nobody's in hell. We Catholics generally believe that there is a hell. I hope nobody's there. I certainly believe in a place of purification. I think it'll be like getting up in the morning When you throw the curtains back, the light is just too much. God's light would be too much for us. But I believe, on behalf of the innocent victims in history, that the scales of justice should work out. And if they don't, life is radically unjust. The law of the just...
Well, welcome to reality. Life is radically unjust. And it's not even just about what happens when you die, either. It's what happens when you're here on Earth, right now. The world is radically unjust. There are people dying right now. Think about this. There are children, 3 years old, in some African tribes, some African areas. These tribes believe that children are possessed by something for some stupid reason. And if they believe that they're possessed by this something, then they put them outside the perimeter of the tribe and just let them die out there. And that's it. And they go through the entire process of crying for their mom and starving to death because they have nothing and nobody outside those walls. And then you have Jeff Bezos, who is filthy rich, who it's literally impossible for him to have worked for the money that he owns. Nobody can possibly put in enough work that is worth that much money. Same with Elon Musk. The world is radically unjust. Welcome to reality, pal. Is this your first time?
Jungle prevails.
Okay, well, I'm just going to go to our next question, which we can respond to some of these issues through that. It's a video question. It comes from Nick Walsh in Nyngan, New South Wales.
How can there be a compassionate God who is all-powerful and has created us, yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
Well, that was a weird... first place. He extended the S. I actually liked that. Yeah. Impotence versus evil question. Why is there suffering when he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-wise? Can't he snap it all away instantly? There is no good answer to this. Either God is not powerful enough to solve the suffering problem, or he doesn't care, so he's not good. If he doesn't care, he's not a good God. He's not benevolent.
Richard Dawkins, you can reflect on that and the previous question.
Well, it's hardly my business to say how could a compassionate God like that exist. Darwin himself said it was impossible for him to believe in a God who was capable of creating such suffering. He actually was talking about suffering in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, the animal kingdom has a crazy amount of suffering.
Do you assume that suffering is a natural part of the human condition?
It's a natural part of the living condition. It's a natural part of Darwinian natural selection, which is one of the reasons why I was so keen to say that I didn't want to live by Darwinian principles. There is massive amount of suffering in the natural world, a huge amount of suffering, and it's...
Living cells must die for almost everything else to live. Plants don't have to kill living cells to survive because they photosynthesize, but everything else, as you go up the chain, has to consume living cells to live.
It seems to me that's an almost inevitable consequence of Darwinian natural selection. I'm more interested, however, in what's true than in what I would like to be true. It would be very nice if there were no suffering in the world. It would be very nice if there were a sort of natural scale of justice, as the Cardinal was saying. But I'm more interested in what's true. So it's not the business of an atheist to justify the ways of God to man. It is the business of a cardinal.
OK, let's go to the Cardinal. The question was, how can there be a compassionate God who's all-powerful and has created us, and yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
I think that's probably the hardest question for us to answer.
Do you struggle with it?
It's impossible to answer, actually.
Yes. If I get a chance to say, to ask a question when I die, I think I'll ask the good God, why is there so much suffering? That's a problem for us. I think the greater problem and I'll come back to the question because it's a very good one. That's the heart of what we're about. I think it's a much greater problem for the atheist to explain why there is goodness and truth and beauty.
Why would that be a problem? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, he's just pivoting and ignoring, as Emily Neptune points out.
Our problem is to cope with suffering. Now, one of the unique, I think, well, certainly special features of Christian teaching is the value of redemptive suffering. And that is the significance of Christ suffering with us and dying on the cross. And that helps people. My first Easter after I was a priest, it was in the hills in Italy. Very sad village. All the men were away in Germany or Switzerland getting big money, home only for 3 weeks a year. And people were coming to confession, coming for consolation. I was even wetter behind the ears than I am now.
Wetter behind the ears? Does that mean he was, like, less experienced?
I didn't know what to say. And eventually I said to someone, well, look, Christ suffered too. Christ had a bad run. Christ died on the cross, and we believe that through his suffering, good will eventually triumph.
Can I take it to a bigger level than that village, to the Holocaust, to genocide, to famine? If there is an omnipotent and all-powerful God, why does he let these things happen?
That's a very good question, but
there's no answer.
If God is going to allow us to be good, he's got to give us freedom.
Oh my God, this whole freedom nonsense. It's such a cop-out answer. There's suffering because there's freedom. Then I guess that means there's no freedom in heaven, right? Because there's no suffering in heaven? Don't give me this bullshit that freedom can't exist without happiness, or vice versa, whatever it is.
There's no alternative to that.
But he chose to intervene at different times in history to save the Jews when they were going over the river Jordan. I mean, there are many times when apparently God has intervened in biblical times. Why not now?
Well, that's, I think Revelation is complete. That's a mighty question. He helped probably through secondary causes for...
Don't tell me that's a good question. It's a question that throws a wrench into your entire belief system. It invalidates your whole belief system. You need to give me an answer to this, or I have no reason to believe.
The Jews to escape and continue. It's interesting, through these secondary causes, probably no people in history have been punished the way the Germans were.
Maybe the Jews?
It's a terrible mystery.
Well, I think there'd be a very strong argument saying that the Jews of Europe suffered worse than the Germans.
Yes, that might be right. Certainly, the suffering.
Are you kidding me? This guy doesn't need to be up here.
And both, I mean, the Jews, there was no reason why they should suffer.
Okay. I'm just going to, we're running out of time. I'm going to go to another...
To give a charitable interpretation of what he's saying, he said Germans were punished worse than anybody else. And by saying that, I think there's an implication there that they were punished for doing something that they were not supposed to do. The Jews were innocent. They didn't do anything to deserve what happened to them in the Holocaust. So the charitable interpretation is what he meant was Germans were punished for their bad behavior worse than anybody else. I don't know why he seems to be like giving them a pass for their punishment or whatever. But okay, you know what? I think I agree with him. Germans were punished worse than almost anybody in World War I before the Holocaust. And that led to the economic conditions that sparked the Holocaust in the first place, that created the civil unrest that led people to look for somebody to blame because they were paying out massive amounts of money after World War I to the international community. So Germans were punished really, really hard for World War I because they were trying to take, space that they were not entitled to, or to which they were not entitled. And then they were punished again in World War II. Terribly. Not to say it's not deserved. I think it was deserved, absolutely. I'm just saying a charitable interpretation of what he's saying might be correct, I suppose.
Another question, it's on a different subject, from Anita Wu.
Jesus preaches, love thy neighbour as thyself. So Cardinal Pell, how can you be against giving our gay neighbours marriage rights when equality and respect are the fundamental foundations of loving and spreading love?
Also, Jesus never said a word about being gay. Any negative stuff about being gay was in the Old Testament. I think there are 2 verses in the New Testament about being gay, and those verses were arguably not talking about being gay. They were talking about basically. They were talking about being with young boys. It's hard to know because of the way that it was written, the different language and all that other stuff, language barrier, but it's not as clear-cut as the Old Testament was, which, by the way, was nullified when Jesus came back. That's why we don't have a problem with eating pork or shellfish or wearing cotton and linen blends or whatever other thing.
Well, it's quite misleading and quite unfair to suggest that Christians hate homosexuals. Christians love everybody.
No, I mean, you may claim to love everybody, but just an obscene number of Christians do hate gay people.
We believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, that it is for the continuity of the human race. We believe that men and women...
Because, if people are allowed to be gay, then the human race will not continue. It's just going to come to an end instantly. The moment that everybody says, you know what, it's okay to be gay, everybody, every single person on planet Earth is going to come out of the closet and start being gay and no longer have any children ever again, right? Is that how it's going to work?
Women are made for one another, spiritually, psychologically, physically. We believe that a man and a woman as a father with their children is far and away the best and most efficient and most economical system to bring up children, and governments should support it. For a homosexual couple to have a union, well and good. There's no reason why that can't be.
Can I just interpose
I think he's talking about a civil union. If they want to have a civil union, that's okay. But not a marriage?
quick question on this? We are running out of time. I mean, do you believe that homosexuality, since it's not a question of choice, is part of God's natural order?
Oh, creation's messy. I think it's the Oriental...
Oh, God. He's going to be digging himself a hole again, isn't he?
Natural order?
Oh, creation's messy. I think it's the Oriental carpet makers always leave a little flaw in their carpet because only God's perfect.
But sorry, but you're suggesting that homosexuals are flawed human beings?
Not necessarily. But
yeah, that's what he just said. And also, Oriental carpet makers leave a flaw in their carpets? So is he saying that God is not perfect in his creation? That's what it sounds like he's saying, right?
But what I am saying is, I don't think homosexual activity is simply the result of genetic makeup, because we are free. We can control our instincts, and like heredity
Oh, give me a fucking break, dude.
and environment, a lot of this practice is learned. But whatever about it, we've got...
Homosexuality is learned? Really? This dude is a joke. Who let this clown up here on this stage? Really?
To try to support these people, show compassion. The Catholic Church has a great record there. We look after more HIV sufferers than any other non-government organization.
No, the Catholic Church doesn't have a great record there. You know what the Catholic Church has a record of doing? Discouraging condom use in areas where HIV is widespread. That's the Catholic Church's record. So I don't want to hear this nonsense. The Catholic Church has a great record. No.
Organisation, but we don't believe it's possible to have homosexual marriage.
I'm going to... we're almost out of time. We've got time for one more question that both of our guests can answer. It's from Catherine Shen.
As an atheist, Professor Dawkins, do you believe that believing in God for emotional support should be allowed even temporarily? Research has proven that people who believe in God has a better chance of surviving terminal illnesses such as cancer, as well as living longer when they go to church. So do you think that believing in God is beneficial for our well-being, even if God is an illusion?
My problem is you can look at the percentage of people who are religious in a country and directly correlate that to the number of extremists in that country. There's a percentage of people who are going completely off the rails at any given moment. Now, there are some countries with more extremists in them than moderates, but extremism is a necessary component of religiosity. Not everyone will turn out to be a nutcase, but some will. And the ones that do cause suffering invariably. I would rather there not be a Muslim state. I'd rather those people come to their senses and realize that they're full of shit. That everything that they've been taught since, the 600s BC, CE, yeah. Since the 600s CE is fabricated BS. I would love for people to come to that conclusion. I'm not holding my breath on that one.
It's perfectly possible that, as you say, believing in God has beneficial effects upon health. It's possible that you're less likely to suffer a duodenal ulcer or something of that sort. But I do have to stress, that's an utterly trivial argument compared to the truth of whether the God actually exists or not. That's a really big question. It's an
right. It's irrelevant ultimately.
Important question, one that the Cardinal and I would agree on. And if there is some minor benefit to health one way or the other, the evidence is not good, by the way, but even bending over backwards to suggest that the evidence is there, that psychosomatic illness may be healed, may be alleviated somewhat by belief in God.
Psychosomatic means it's in your head and it's not real. It doesn't mean it's not real. It just means it's in your head. An example of a psychosomatic illness could be a wife gets pregnant, right? And she's dealing with morning sickness. She throws up all the time. It's not just morning, by the way, when morning sickness happens. Just commonly in the morning. It could be all day. She throws up constantly. She's sick constantly and is miserable. And before you know it, the husband is showing those same symptoms as the wife. He starts throwing up too. Inexplicably. He's not pregnant, obviously. There's no reason for him to be experiencing this, but he is. Psychosomatic manifestation. It's in his head, but it's actually creating real results. Real things are taking place, despite that fact.
Psychosomatic medicine is well known. Placebos work. If God is simply a placebo, that's fine. But I'm interested in whether he's actually there.
OK, Cardinal Pell, final word, actually.
So am I. It's a question of truth. Christians don't present God as like Santa Claus, something a myth that's useful for children. And believing in God and being a Christian cuts both ways. More people were killed for their Christian belief in the last century than any other century, probably than all the other centuries combined.
Okay, I don't know if that's true. Everything the dude says seems to be completely made up. But even assuming that that's true, I would put money on the idea that the reason that happened is because there are more Christian people around now than there were last century. We have 6, 7, 8 billion people. I don't know how many. 7 billion people at the time that this came out, maybe. Last century, we had in the millions, the high millions. Oh, we had 1.6 billion people on Earth in the year 1900. We are breeding exponentially right now. That's crazy.
They died on principle to be faithful to Jesus. So
that is not why more Christians died in the past century than ever. It's not because they all died on principle. They're not all martyrs. Maybe they all died because that's what happens. You die. Welcome to planet Earth. But that's just not how it works. I'm sorry. It's just fabricated nonsense, all of it.
So we might get some benefits. We mightn't get ulcers. We might live a bit longer. That might have much more to do with our heredity. But we follow Christ because we believe it's the truth. I think it does bring a peace of mind. It does help us. But sometimes it gets us into... my life would be much simpler and much easier if I didn't have to go to bat for a number of Christian principles.
Well, then don't.
Have you ever regretted that you do?
Sometimes I wonder.
Seriously?
No.
That's a yes. That is a yes. He totally wonders if it was a bad idea to get into this. Sadly, Catholic priests are not allowed to have, they have to be celibate, basically. Unfortunately. I think that's just sad and wrong. I don't like that at all. I wish that there was some other rule in effect. And, that rule about being celibate wasn't always part of Christian belief or Catholic belief. That's relatively new in the grand scheme of things. And I think it causes more damage and destruction than anything. It's just sad. By the by, our population growth is slowing down and expected to reverse. A number of countries have already reversed population growth from Robert Adset. Correct. Yes, that is correct. Absolutely. It's likely that our population growth is going to turn around, and we may have already peaked, or damn near it. Very close to peaking now. One big problem with it, there are a lot of problems with that. To actually see the effects that would come forth as a result of decreasing the population, to see the effects on climate change, it's going to take too long. It's going to take 80 to 100 years to see the actual effects of decreasing the population on the climate. And by that point, the problem needs to have been solved already. So, yeah, having a bunch of people is unsustainable. Like that, having more than we have right now is probably unsustainable. We are reversing course, but for the sake of climate change, it's not really going to help much or change much, unfortunately.
That's all we have time for tonight. Before we go, let's check the final results of tonight's Quanda vote. With more than 20,000 of you voting, we have a 76% saying no. Religious belief does not make the world a better place. Please thank our special guests, Professor Richard Dawkins and Cardinal George Pell.
He seems unhappy about those results. Although, again, I bet I could convince him to go that way too. Religious belief does not make the world a better place. Just pose the question about Islam to him, and he'd instantly take my side on it, I bet.
And next week on Q&A, we return to worldly matters with Attorney General Nicola Roxon, the manager of opposition business Christopher Pyne, international human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson.
All right. Anyway, that's pretty interesting. I don't know. I thought the debate was really interesting. I used to watch a billion of these things, so I was thinking about maybe we'll go through a bunch of these old debates that I used to watch back in the day. A lot of these people that do the debates, a lot of the atheists that take part in the debates are terrible now. They're awful, honestly. Not a huge fan of Sam Harris. Not a fan of Richard Dawkins. Christopher Hitchens is great in a lot of ways, but again, he was in favor of the Iraq War. He was kind of conservative. There are a lot of people that I'm just not a fan of, but their contribution to the movement was still valuable and appreciated. Yeah, I don't think I would have any of these people on my YouTube channel and endorse them. I just want to make it clear to everybody I'm not a fan of these atheists. I think that they've done the wrong thing consistently and had the wrong positions at every turn, unfortunately. So, yeah, I just want to make that clear as we continue on. Bill Nye is pretty good, I understand, and he moves in my circles. I know people who have had dinner with him and chatted with him and stuff. I know people who know Bill Nye.